Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. It's Jason Pan here behind the camera, and in front of me we have Shan Cole. We'll be going over his Utah deck profile that he took to Treasure Cup. But quickly before then, I'd just like to give a shout out to our sponsors, Team Card Titan, Beyond Odyssey, and Eternal Magic. Thank you very much. Additionally, PX3, we are offering coaching. If you like more details or know any information, have a look at our Facebook page. So Shannon, could you walk us through?
Yeah, so I brought Green Uda to the event. So she's the film package, the film queen. So if you played Film Kid, or if you'd seen, I played Film Kid before, it's pretty much the similar package. We've got a few new pieces, like I do run the 8 cost in it, as well as there's a few sort of new events that you run with Uda, as well as her leader effect actually just supporting the package even more. So I'll get into that into a bit, but the day went pretty well. I think I finished 25th out of I think it was 400 to 450 people.
Yeah.
Yeah, so around that. So 25th with Green Uda, which I'm pretty happy with because I don't think it is the best deck out there, but I think it can contend pretty well if you're playing it properly. And there's a lot of things that you have to do. It's not as easy as you think as just play sort of your 7 cost Leafy. There's a lot of decisions that have to be made and ways you've got to play it. I think I've got pretty lucky with my matchups. I versed a lot of yellow, so I versed maybe 3 in all, maybe 4. I versed 1 Kata, so maybe half my, I think it might have been maybe 4 matches all up was yellow. I versed 2 PCP, Purple Luffy, which I think is an okay matchup. I versed only 1 Sakazuki, which I think is a bad matchup, but is definitely winnable. Just sort of depends on what they see. I did lose that 1 Sakazuki, but I didn't see a 7 cost. And the 1 Purple Luffy matchup I didn't win, I didn't see the 7 cost as well. So the only 2 losses I had, we didn't see the key card of the deck. And then I versed 1 Nami, which this deck just sort of annihilates because you get so many big bodies and you've got the double swing at the end. So that was a nice one to verse as well, I think. But yeah, I was pretty happy I took it. It's a really fun deck to play. The games go quick. It's really chill, but there's still a lot of times where you need to make really important decisions. And with the deck, you want to run mostly film. And the reason for that is your leader effect draws you a card. Well, it reveals a card, and if it's film, you'll draw it. So you want to be hitting film off the top of your deck. And so we only run 10 non-film cards. So we've got 4 EZO, 2 of the 0 cost event, and 4 of our 8 cost kid. And so this means 40 of the cards will be film, so we should be hitting it most of the time. There's definitely times you don't hit it, but you want that to be high when you're deck building. You don't want it to be too low, your film count. Because you have to have a high film count, it means there's a few ratios on things that aren't the best. So I've only got 8 2Ks. Most decks run about 12. It's unfortunate, but you just don't want to add too many non-film. You can run about 10 2Ks, but instead I've chosen for the 0 cost event. And that's because we have a lot of dead cards, so it actually ends up being like a 2K and a 1K most of the time. I've hardly ever felt like it's clogged my hand. And if it is clogging your hand, you could always throw it to Uda to restand something. And then sort of the other thing that you're kind of missing is blockers. You'd like some more smaller blockers to go with your kid. There was a few games where I was really hoping I had a small blocker, but I didn't. And we only really run 4 Uda, and that's because there's no other film blockers. We might see some more coming out in EB, so Uda might get a little bit better there. But at the moment, we've only got the 4 Uda. As sort of like a pseudo blocker for film, I've got 3 Sword Style Onigiri. It's a card you won't see many people run, but I really like it. I mean, at the end of the day, it's an event card that can be thrown to Uda if you really need to. It's got an interesting trigger, so it can rest a 5 cost. But what it does is it gives something 6k for 3 Don. So it's most of the time a blocker unless it's a really big attack. The only downside is that can be played around, like your opponent just swinging low numbers or stop attacking on the last one or something like that. But it can also bring out a vanilla, so it can bring out this Usopp, which is really clutch sometimes, being able to bring the Usopp down because your opponent might not expect it. But also against decks that remove like Sakazuki, bringing down a character at the end of the turn can be really interesting because they've sort of prepped their whole turn to clear the board, and then you pull something else down and they don't actually have Don or they don't have the cards to clear it anymore. So sometimes it's really nice, and I mean if they've got a blocker, getting an extra character down can always be good. You run a fair few events in this deck because you need film cards to be hit as well as you want to throw film cards to Uda. So we've sort of got the Uda events over here as well. Blacklight, you can rest a 5 cost, or Killer rested 5 cost or less. It's really good against PCP. It's great against Sakazuki as well. So they run a lot of blockers that you can get through, and I mean, there's so many decks that this will be really good. It could definitely be bumped up, but I've chosen to go with a 4-arm Invincible. This was the same ratios that I think we saw the Japanese deck that had done well with Uda. So it's the same ratio, and I really like the 4-arm Invincible because it really gives you that consistency of having the double attack when you want it. So many games were won by this. Like, I had a game against Enel where he sort of cleared my whole board and starved me, and I had nothing on board, like, except for a few 5k attackers. And he was going to be able to, like, 9 cost my Luffy, because I think he 8 costed something into my life, so I had 6 life, and he had 1, so he's gonna be able to, like, Yamato my Luffy next turn. So instead what I did was I just, like, did a 5k, and I was kind of expecting him to take that last life, because they want to get the value off of their leader effect, because I'd only have my Uda left after the second attack, and so he did take that second attack, and then I went for 11, restand 11, so it took his last life off, and then he had to throw, like, 4 cards. Obviously, if he didn't take that life, I might have played some characters, but he did go for it, so it allowed me to do that attack. And then obviously, Enel could get their life back, but because I did that play confidently, because I had a second I'm Invincible in hand, so I didn't even really need board. I knew I'd be able to sort of get through even without board, because I run so many of these. So it really allows you to use the card in the mid game, because you know you're going to have a second one to back it up after. Which you do a lot on the kid leader, but if you've only got 1, you're kind of saving it for the end, and if you don't get into a good position, sometimes it's not good enough. You can also use it mid-game to clear, so it's a really great card, and you can always just throw it to Uda or the 0-cost event if you find it clogging your hand. New Genesis is an amazing card for Uda. It's kind of like a Sakazuki leader ability in a card almost. In some ways, it just kind of cleans your deck up, and you see the cards you want to see more by having this card. So if you don't know what it does, it's a 1-cost event, and it searches your top 3 for a film card, which is pretty much all your deck. And it actually refreshes the Don at the end, so it doesn't cost anything. And one mistake I see a lot of people doing is they play this on their sort of 1 or 2 Don turn, which I don't agree with. And the reason I don't agree with it is, yeah, with other searches, you want to use that non-used Don, but this is free. So rather than using it at those turns, I would suggest using it at either your 4-5 Don turn, or like your 7, or around your 7 Don turn. And the reason for that is, like, let's say you use this and you don't have a Luffy, and you find your Luffy with this card, but then your next 2 draws are more Luffys. Imagine your hand clogging up with like 3 Luffys, and you don't want to play them down, and you don't actually have anything to play off of Luffy. So if you just waited a couple turns, you'd be able to see what you get, and then what you've got, and you can then decide what you need. So if that happened, you got, like, let's say you drew 2 Luffys, you could then play New Genesis and get Brook out, or something that could be played off of that Luffy. So I'd just wait for the turn that you really need a piece, and that could be at like 4 Don, for example. Like if you had a Brook, and you had no 3 cost to play off of Brook, it's a great turn to play New Genesis. You look for that 3 cost to go with Brook. But if you had the Brook and the Usopp, you might not need to play New Genesis, just save it. I think it's a bit greedy to play it. And also your opponent doesn't know what you've got until you sort of play it as well, so rather than giving that information away. These are sort of the low drops you run, so you need them to be sort of played off each other, all the waterfall effects. It will look really standard. I think Bartolomeo I chose to run over something like Frankie. You're just not really getting these big vanillas down in this meta that has a lot of removal, and Bardo, you're not going to be playing it often, but it just sort of is there as like, I kind of like it off maybe like 8-cost kid, because you can, if you've got a 7-cost Luffy on the field, you can attack with it, play your 8-cost kid and then restand the 7-cost Luffy. It didn't actually come up for me today, so this is definitely a card you could take out, but I just kind of like it because we aren't running a lot of blockers, so you can put on that pressure and then restand, which you'd normally do with Uda. And so if you've got Uda, you play that over the Bardo, but it's another film card that's got a 1k counter, which is important. The only number ratio here that you might be sort of wondering about is the 3 Nami. And the reason that I ran 3 is just this deck has so many dead cards. You just don't want to, especially because we're running the 8-cost version, you don't want to be having a huge hand and then all of them being dead. And with Nami, you don't actually even get to use her 1 Don effect to look for 3 all that often, because whenever you've got 1 spare Don, you can just use it on your leader. So you actually need 2 spare Don, and 2 spare Don could be 2 Don on an attack, or if you've got like, I don't know, you don't have 2 sped on as often as you have 1. So you don't actually get use out of it as much. It's just kind of like a 3-5 that doesn't have counter a lot of the time. And there's obviously times where it's great and you're just sort of generating a lot of cards off of it. But I think you're going to see it those times you need it because you run New Genesis and you have your leader effect. The 4-cost Zoro, I think, is much better than if you like wanted to run, like, cut one of these for like a Frankie or something. That's mainly, it comes off of your Luffy, which just means you've got more hits. The 6k is really good against most decks, like PCP, most of the things are 6, so it's good enough. And then also when you play, if you play this combo against Sakazuki, if they don't have enough removal pieces, it can be hard for them to remove, because like, let's say they are able to reduce this Luffy enough. With a 3-cost, they could reduce the Luffy and then leader effect the 3-cost, so they can do a 2 and a 1. But now they'd have to reduce Luffy to a 1, or like less or whatever, but they'd also have to reduce this by 2, which they can't just do with leader effect, so it actually asks them to have more cards, and it's more likely you'll get a card to stick or waste more cards from their hand, so it's pretty nice to have the 4-cost over the 3 when you're dropping Luffy. Obviously if you have Brook you can run that, but sometimes you don't always have Brook, or you've used it in the early game. And then the boss monster I chose to run was 8-cost Kid, and I love this. You can run Tendofi. I think it's probably better into the Saka matchup. It's kind of good to have those ratios, but I just love 8-cost Kid. I really wanted to play with it today. It brings me back to 01. Jason...
PTSD, but honestly.
Jason's not looking too happy with the 8-cost Kid. If you played 01, you know that feeling when you're just trying to clear it and you can't. It's really fun when you get it down and you're generating cards off your leader, you're generating cards off Nami, you drop a blocker, you restand your blocker, he kind of just sits there as a big body they can't remove. It's really good against PCP. Kata isn't running as many 8-costs anymore, and even Enel, like, sometimes them putting this into your life, like after you've dropped a 7 Luffy, or like they'll run out of it, like it does a lot for the deck, I think. And it doesn't always work, because sometimes you have too many dead cards in hand, or you don't see your blockers or something, but when it does work it feels really nice. It's a lot of fun. That's kind of why I went for it, and it really does stump a lot of people, because what you can do is, like, if you're in a rough situation and you're just taking all your life, you could then drop your 8-cost and it just brings you, like, the game just completely changes. That's why I enjoy it over the 10-cost, because if you're playing the 10-cost and let's say they dropped a bunch of characters that are all active, your 10-cost doesn't do anything now for that next turn, whereas this, if they dropped a bunch of active characters, at least 8-cost kind of does something there. Yeah, and obviously the main combo of that is you're dropping sort of Uda, so you drop Uda and then you'd hopefully have a Luffy on board that you would attack with, and then you could restand by throwing an event with that Uda, so you've got 2 blockers for your 8-cost, and then you can start drawing cards as well. But the deck ran pretty smooth, and I'm pretty happy with all the numbers. I really found that Nami number to be completely fine, so I'd give it a try if you think you've been seeing too many dead cards, but you kind of see it as a soft rule that you wouldn't ever cut Nami. Just maybe give it a shot. Maybe give 3 Sword Style a shot if you want. They're obviously not needed in the deck, but it's what I ran, and I really enjoyed it. So
anything you would change, or
I really found, like, the biggest thing was not having blockers. So I would see if I can maybe add blockers into the deck somehow, but it's just not having film cards.
Yeah,
it's really hard with the deck. I think it's really rough, and I think it's more about you need to wait until EB.
Absolutely.
And I partially think Uta only worked because I think a lot of people aren't playing it, and a lot of people aren't playing it well, so I was able to get away with it this set. But I think if more people played it, you'd get really punished. Like, you're only running 8 2Ks, so you really can get punished with things like that, and people, like, if they learnt your deck and what you're running, Uta could definitely get more punished. So it's probably a one tournament sort of run. I would definitely give it a shot at your locals, have some fun with it. People won't expect it as much if you're running it really well. But I think I might be waiting until EB to try this deck out again.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Shannon. It was very insightful, especially the new Genesis, like knowing when to use it.
Yeah.
Was there any shout-outs you wanted to do?
Yeah. We did a lot of practice before, so I'd like to give a big shout-out to Jason behind the camera, our P. Luffy master. So I did a lot of practice against P. Luffy. I think the matchup, it's still hard for me to say if it's like sort of 50-50. It depends what people see. But this 8-cost, if you get it down and you've got enough resources, like, you just destroy Purple Luffy. They can't get through your blockers, and that, like, all of their bodies that they've placed in Gordon wide with, if they haven't placed, if they haven't gotten a 7-cost down or something, like, it's just going to stick, and all of their attacks just get eaten up by the 8-cost. So you kind of destroy Purple Luffy. I'd like to thank our other members from PX3. So Nick is our NL player, yellow player, and I got a lot of good practice in with him, and I versed so much yellow today. So I think I'm really thankful that I got to practice with him because he's a really good player. Also, all of our other members on PX3, like Kevin and Kenneth. So thank you to sort of everyone. And then there's also a few other perf boys. So like Zhao, I got some practice in with Saka, and a few other people that I bounced Udrop ideas off, like Darcy and Joseph. So I'd just like to thank everyone that sort of helped me out with that one. Yeah.
No, thank you for the profile, Shannon. One final look at the deck. You give us a like, comment, and subscribe if you have any comments or queries, or message us on Facebook if you want for more details on the coaching. Finally, one last shout out to our sponsors, Beyond Odyssey, Team Car Titan, and Eternal Magic. Peace out.